Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Timothy Ferriter? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Timothy Dunn Ferriter was born on April 17, 1975. He went by the name Tim. At some point, Tim married a woman named Tracy. They lived in Arizona for a while, but moved to Jupiter, Florida in December of 2021. The couple had 4 children. Some of them were adopted. One in particular was a boy who had been born on September 7, 2007 in Vietnam. The Ferriters adopted him from an orphanage there. He becomes an important figure in this case. The court has made an effort to protect his identity, so I will call him John Doe. John had some challenging behavioral problems, which were frightening, severe, and long-standing. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. In late December 2021, the Jupiter Police Department received a report from a contractor who was asked to build an office in the garage of the Ferriter family house. The specifications for the project were unusual. He was to build an 8x8 room in the garage with its own ceiling and door. There was to be a deadbolt lock in the door and a doorknob on the outside, but no doorknob on the inside, as if the room was designed to keep someone trapped. The room was to have electricity, air conditioning, and a camera in the ceiling. It was a rush job. The project had to be completed in 2 days. The contractor agreed to build the room, but he thought the project was very strange. This is why he reported his experience to the police. On January 28, 2022, the police investigated a report that the Ferriters' adopted son, again I'm calling him John Doe, was missing. They made contact with Tracy Ferriter, who told them that John had run away. His behavior may be explained by him getting in trouble at school the day before. 2 days later, on January 30, the police paid a visit to the Ferriter family house to see if John Doe had returned. They didn't get an answer at the door. They called Tracy, but she stated that she did not want the police entering her house. The police decided to return later. At this time, Tracy allowed one officer to enter the house. He found the 8x8 room in the garage, the one which had been built by the contractor. Inside the room there was a mattress, a box spring, a small desk, and a folding chair. The officer noticed that there was a surveillance camera in the room. The floor of the structure was simply the garage floor. There was no special type of flooring. For instance, there was no carpet. On the next day, January 31, the police caught up with John Doe at his school. He told them all about the box-like room in the garage, including that he was often locked in the room. John said that a typical day started with his father letting him out of the locked room. He would go to school. After school, John was returned to the room and once again locked in it. John spent a lot of time in the room. The longest was between 16 and 18 hours. Using the bathroom was not always an option. Instead, he was given a bucket. The reason John ran away was because he felt as though no one loved him. His father was aggressive and physically struck him from time to time. John also accused his father of striking him when they lived in Arizona. He told the police that he did not want to return home. The police obtained a search warrant for the video surveillance captured by the camera inside the room in the garage. Tim was captured on the camera yelling and screaming at John. There were many videos featuring this behavior. The police visited the former home of the Ferriter family and spoke to the current owners. They talked about how, when they moved in, the garage contained a creepy room, which only locked from the outside. The current owners dismantled the room. This made it seem like John Doe's parents had been using this locking room strategy for some time. Both Tim Ferriter and his wife Tracy were arrested in connection with harming John Doe. They were charged with aggravated child abuse and false imprisonment. The court decided that they would be tried separately. Tim would go on trial in October of 2023. At the time of making this video, Tracy's trial has not yet been scheduled. Right before Tim's trial, he was additionally charged with neglect of a child. Tim was offered a plea deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would serve just 2 years in prison and receive 5 years of felony probation. He rejected the offer and decided to take his chances at trial. On October 12, 2023, 48-year-old Tim Ferriter was found guilty on all counts. At the time making this video, he is awaiting sentencing. Tim is facing up to 40 years in prison. Now moving to my analysis. The state argued that by keeping John Doe in the room in the garage, Tim was behaving maliciously and delivering a punishment which was disproportional to John Doe's bad behavior. They further argued that Tim's crime was ongoing. It wasn't like John Doe was placed in the room just a few times. He was in there on a regular basis for several hours at a time. Tim's defense argued that he was simply a bad parent who improperly responded to John Doe's incorrigible, dangerous, destructive, and damaging behavior. This brings me to the question, was Tim actually guilty? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that Tim Ferriter was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. In Tim's garage, he had a contractor build a small room that was a lot like a prison cell. It locked from the outside, the lights were controlled from the outside, and there was no ambient light whatsoever in the room. When the lights were off, it was pitch black inside. John Doe spent hours in the room on a regular basis. It was not unusual for him to be in there for about 11 hours overnight. At the longest, he may have been in there for between 16 and 18 hours. Much of the time in the room was spent in complete darkness. There was no other room in the house for John Doe. It wasn't like he would occasionally sleep in a normal bedroom. John was separated from the other children in the house. He was treated much differently. For example, he would usually be given leftovers for dinner, and he was denied snacks. Tim was physically aggressive at times and was captured on video berating and cursing at John for various alleged offenses. Some of the offenses seemed minor. For example, Tim yelled at John for stealing chocolate and cookies from the kitchen and for having a bad attitude. John was forced to clean out the bucket that he used in his room. On one occasion, when Tim ordered him to clean the bucket, he demanded that John avoid being detected by the neighbors. This makes it seem like Tim was aware that he was committing a crime through his treatment of John. Moving to the exculpatory factors, Tim's son had symptoms consistent with reactive attachment disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Tim had sought help for his son from mental health clinicians and the school system, but they didn't really seem to help John in any meaningful way. By John's own admission, his behavior was really terrible. He engaged in activities like hitting, lying, stealing, pushing his brother off a bicycle, embarrassing his sister, hacking into school computers, and pretending to be a member of the school board. John stated that he intentionally broke the rules, usually over 5 times a week. There is little question that he was out of control, and any parents in a similar situation would have been distressed and frustrated. There was a notable dangerous component in this case. For example, John had a particular affinity for edged weapons like box cutters. Tim did not randomly strike John. All the physical aggression was in direct response to antisocial behavior. John testified that his parents just made a mistake. He implied that they were shocked by his actions, and he did not believe they were trying to do any harm. John thought the best course of action was to forgive them and move on. Tim placed a camera in the room and made many video recordings. Why would he create a record of his own wrongdoings? Perhaps he really did believe that he was within his rights. One could argue that he lacked a criminal state of mind. When considering all the evidence, do I think that Timothy Ferriter was guilty? Yes, I believe he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's hard to defend the idea of building a prison cell in one's house. I don't think that Tracy's situation is looking too good either. She may have just witnessed a preview of what's going to happen to her. It's worth noting that Tracy does have a few things going for her. She did not appear to be physically aggressive and did not seem to be the one in charge. Maybe she can blame Tim for everything and escape responsibility. Moving to the next question, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. For some reason, perhaps because of attachment problems, John Doe's behavior was out of control from an early age. He repeatedly violated societal norms and refused to follow instructions. Tim and Tracy didn't have any idea what to do. When they sought assistance from others, they didn't get any helpful answers. Tim did not understand why his adopted son was acting out. In addition, Tim had low frustration tolerance. He came to believe that John was misbehaving in direct defiance of him, like John was deliberately trying to embarrass, aggravate, and provoke Tim. This was personal. It wasn't because of insecure attachment or other adverse experiences. John was trying to be victorious, and Tim was not going to let that happen. He was not going to be antagonized and defeated by someone he viewed as ungrateful. Tim decided to use an extreme method of containment to completely control and punish John. He made himself believe that this was the only way. Tim was fully justified in his own mind. In line with this thinking, Tim was verbally aggressive with John on several occasions. For example, Tim said to John, quote, "You've been stealing and running away calling yourself Richard. You're lucky you have anything. Give me a blanking break. If you want to get serious with me, stand up. Stand up. You want to get serious with me?" Unquote. Here we see how Tim was daring John to physically challenge him, like he was trying to provoke John into a fight. In another instance, Tim said, quote, "If you're going to break blank, then break blank, right? I don't give a blank. Let's break it. Let's break all this blank. I don't need it. Let's rip it off the wall." Unquote. Here Tim is trying to prove to John that he doesn't care what happens. Tim is willing to employ a scorched earth tactic and do anything it takes to dominate the situation. This complete domination strategy is evident in another exchange. Tim asked John, "Are you supposed to touch the air conditioning?" John replied, "No." Tim asked, "Why did you touch it?" John answered, "Because it was getting hot." Tim responded, quote, "I don't give a blank if it was hot. You're a tough guy. You don't touch the air conditioning. I'll deal with you tomorrow on that." Unquote. Tim framed his entire relationship with his adopted son as a battle of wills, a war that he must win. From Tim's perspective, everything was at stake. He refused to accept defeat. Unfortunately, Tim's actions created a vicious cycle. John's behavior became worse because he was being confined to a windowless room for hours at a time. In addition to the combat mentality, Tim appeared to be sadistic. Even parents who are dominant and aggressive would typically be reluctant to take the drastic action that Tim did. There is the sense that Tim really wanted John to suffer. He wanted to make him pay for defying him. Now moving to my final thoughts. One of the most amazing aspects of this case is that Tim was able to convince himself that his behavior was acceptable. He appeared to be quite confident that he was within his rights. Perhaps there was some grandiosity and a sense of entitlement at work in this case. Tim's fantasy extended so far that he even rejected a generous plea offer. One could argue that Tim's legal maneuvers are consistent with his parenting style. He simply refuses to give in. Now he is going to pay the price in the form of incarceration. Tim had a strong desire in his life to build a prison cell, which he was able to do both literally and figuratively. He had the first one built by a contractor, but his next one will be provided by the state. Those are my thoughts in the case of Timothy Ferriter. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.